Hello, my friends. I thought this would be a good time to start this presentation. I'm sorry to get last time. I did the whole thing and didn't get the forgot to push record. It's recording now, and so it counts. Um, I want to talk today about Meadows Massacre and the Utah War and the difficulties surrounding the two and how the two are connected to each other. So let's talk about how that worked right now. Okay. This is one of the hardest chapters I'll ever teach, but it's important for you to know what happened. There lies much controversy in these things. As you can see, there's several books that have been written. This is only the six most popular ones. Some exonerate others, indict others, etc. Finally, three renowned church historians, all employed by the church history department, researched and wrote the best book that I know of to resolve these disputes. It's called The Massacre of Meadows, and I highly recommend it to any of you. Like so many other events in church history, what is reported depends on information available through family histories, prehistories, and folklore. Here's an example of something I studied quickly for 35 years, but discovered my year in the Journal of Modern History. This is not the Mount Mouse Massacre. This is an example other than that, just to show you how it works. Fact or fable? The majority of Nauvoo saints escaped the Mouse Bay departing early when the Missouri River froze over miraculously. Now, I'm sure you've all heard this before. Let me tell you the truth. In the Journal of Modern History, January 2017, volume 43, number 1, pages 30 to 58, quote, the misunderstandings are wide-ranging. The first error is the notion that almost all of the Nauvoo-era saints exited for the West in February 1846 with the Brigham Company, while a minority stayed behind to finish the temple. Second mistake regards that most, if not all, of those saints who departed in February crossed the frozen Mississippi River, and you've seen the pictures of them crossing the frozen river. Third conclusion posits that God provided the ice bridge to help the people escape, left it in movies, which is very much taught. Another myth is that 9 family babies were born the night of the winter exodus. Records kept during this time show that this is not true. The Brigham Survey Group was only an advance company of about 2,500 people, or fewer, while the great large part of them stayed behind. As a result, also, various across the weather was mild, and everyone in Young's advance company ferried across the river on quite a flotilla of boats. They encamped between February 4th and 22nd at Sherry Creek. They floated across and were ready to start west when the ice sheets formed. They barely for 5 days. Relatively few joined Young's company then. Young's company at Sherry Creek was organized and ready to go before the ice formed. There were only a few cases of latecomers actually started the western journey by crossing the ice. There might have been 200 or 300 people at the very, very most. The weather history proves that the ice did form in February 24th, 25th. Why is that? That the body of LDS life writings, biographies, and histories were written during the period the rest of the century, and the next assert that their subjects crossed the ice on the dates before they exited. These include accounts written by really famous people. Andrew Jensen, B.H. Roberts, Joseph Lee Smith, Leonard Harrington, all prominent LDS historians, all wrote this. Historians who avoided the error include John Henry Evans, E. C. McGowan, and Preston Dilley, people you might have heard before. William Barrett's seminary text, the Restored Church gives the ice bridge date as February 25th, and in a footnote says that the people crossed the river before February 5th. It was not frozen. So let's talk about the only reason I'm writing that up is to show you that there are a lot of things that are taught that are not true. Today, everything I'm going to teach you about the Utah War and the Mount Massacre is true. Okay, and I hope that you can accept it that way. Four factors led to this unfortunate chapter in the history of the church, the Utah War. Number 1, Nathan Cannon vowed that if he was elected president, he would replace Brigham Young as the governor of the state, which he does. The Republican National Party established as its urged Congress to rid the territories of the twin relics of barbarism, slavery, and polygamy. The Democratic Party, which was pro-slavery, suddenly denounced polygamy in Utah, even though they were pro-slavery. And fourth, Associate Judge William Drummond, an immoral man who left his wife and children back east and brought a Washington, D.C. prostitute with him to his appointment in Utah, sent an officer to horse Levi Abrahams, a Jewish convert to Mormonism, because of the truth of comment he made about his character. Drummond ran for the law and made a falsified report to the President Buchanan about the Utah rebellion that became the administration's belief regarding the Utah problem. Without ordering any investigation of any kind, President Buchanan ordered Alfred Cumming of Georgia to become governor and directed a military force of 2,500 men, which is a full third of the U.S. military at the time, escorting him to Salt Lake City. Pioneers also saw freight wagons traveling west to supply an army of 1,500 troops. The President was now officially sending to Utah with the new governor. The government also stopped mail service to Utah Territory, effectively cutting off the communication between the states and the east. So, even Stephen Douglas, a congressman and former friend of the Saints, spoke against the Latter-day Saints in the Illinois election. Joseph Parr said that if he did, he would fail. He did. He lost to Abraham Lincoln and was never in politics again. The Saints learned that their strongly worded petition and reports of their two men former territory officers had deeply alarmed and angered President Buchanan and his advisors. That's the truth. The President viewed the Saints' actions as rebellious and appointed new men to the vacant offices in Utah. Eastern newspapers and politicians, meanwhile, demanded that he use a military action to oust Brigham as governor, quell the Saints' rebelliousness, and see that the benefits were seen and protected. So the United States of America in the East believes that in the West we're having this huge rebellion where we're not at all, not even a little bit. To its critics, the plan is not excessively expensive, but rumors soon spread that the president intended to carry it out. Buchanan side as his duty to establish federal authority in Utah. At the time, the United States was experiencing significant tensions over the matter of slavery. Many people feared that slaveholders in the South states might someday form their own country. Sitting over in Utah might dissuade other regions from challenging the federal government and might create a unified United States of America, was the thought. Well, that wasn't what happened. Brigham Young sent a proclamation throughout the entire territory stating the church's intentions to, number one, rid all armed forces from coming to Utah territory on whatever pretense, hold all forces in Utah in readiness to repel any invasion, and to declare an arsenal on the territory. Brigham Young had been through New York, he had been through Ohio, he had been through Nauvoo, he had seen the government attack the church over and over again. He was scared shitless. He also requested mission presidents and church leaders in outlying branches and settlements send missionaries and other saints home to Utah. So we have missionaries all over the world, and they all come home for 2 years. They leave England, they leave the East Coast, they leave California, they leave the islands, they leave everywhere. They come home. Quote, release those of the elders who have been laboring there for any great length of time. Introduce as many of our young men to church as possible, as their parents are extremely anxious to see them. Quote, he then mustered the territorial militia and ordered that no grain or other staples be sold to passing immigrants or speculators, which led to the Massacre. He ordered the building of fortifications and also said the required to arrest the army and supply trains. He also sent Meadows the White Mountain Boys to find another suitable location for settlement should the states have to abandon homes. So they were so afraid they were going to have to leave Utah, he actually sent out people to find somewhere else for them to live. Excuse me, I need to get rid. Sorry. Companies and immigrants on the plains were safely guided to the valley, and all immigration plans for the next season were canceled. He also sent a letter to President Buchanan informing him that his army could not enter Utah until satisfaction and arrangements were made by a peace commission. The letter was also carried to State's longtime friend Thomas L. Kane, who lived in Washington, D.C., asking him to intervene with the church on the government on the church's behalf. Well, the Saints in and around Salt Lake City prepared for invasion. George R. Smith revisits territory settlements to warn them of the coming army. These McDermott had already reached the town, and everyone else was on edge. They feared that additional troops from California would invade the southern Utah first, attacking the settlements, therefore working their way north. So they were afraid of being attacked on both sides, from the north and from the south. Captain Van Vliet, the quartermaster corps, arrived in Sac State to make arrangements for food and forage for the incoming army. He was immediately convinced that the States were non-rebellion, and went back to Washington, D.C. tried to convince people that was true, but was not able to do it. Meanwhile, by September 1857, Brigham proclaimed martial law in the territory and forbade the entry of any armed forces from the United States government. Here, the Naval Legion prepared for invasion, and nearly every Utah community made preparations for defense were accelerated. He also instructed bishops in the villages to prepare to burn everything should the hostiles actually break out. They were going to burn everything to the ground and go live somewhere else.
Brethren and sisters, we are fast approaching dire circumstances. The President of the United States, James Buchanan, having received false and ruinous reports of sedition and treason by this people, has ordered troops from the United States Army to march to our beloved territory to put down this supposed insurrection. They lie at our doorstep as I speak. It is for this cause that I have issued instructions for all able-bodied men to stand forth and aid in the burying of the temple footings and foundation, the cashing of the stones therein, and the removal of all the public shops on Temple Block. Brethren, we must not allow this sacred, hallowed ground to be defiled or desecrated.
I don't like the looks of this, General.
Forward! Sir, Lieutenant, take a couple of men and check out this compound. Smith! Roberts! Stand fast! Checks out, sir. It's just some farmer's field.
Field? In the middle of the city? What'll these Mormons think of next?
I think they are ready to burn this city to the ground should we so much as fire a shot. Now let's move it, Colonel. I see nothing for us to do here. Elephant march!
So as you can see, The Utah War was seen as the United States government attacking the Saints, who were helpless and defenseless, and they were ready to burn their homes to destroy everything, including the temple block, if necessary. In the context of the Utah War, the Meadows Massacre can best be understood in the context of the war history surrounding the approach of the troops to Utah. The Fancher train, an immigrant company composed of several families from Arkansas and a group of horsemen who called themselves the Missouri Wildcats, made its way to central Utah and north California at the same time. How unfortunate. The company had around 140 people, most of them young and eager, and starting new life in California. Several married and traveling with small children. The leaders were Alexander Fancher and John Baker. Captain Fancher, who had traveled to California before, was a natural leader who was known for his integrity and courage. Captain Baker traveled with 3 of his own grown children and a grandson. Around the time that Captain Fancher had first traveled to California, the southern route to Utah had plenty of open grazing land and watering spots, so going to Utah was a natural thing to do. Since then, new settlements along the roads had claimed this ground, making it difficult for large wagons to care for their livestock without the state's cooperation. Now, with the army approaching, many states were treating outsiders with suspicion and hostility. Many also obeyed the council not to sell provisions to outsiders, and so you got the Fancher and Baker Company are coming in peace, but they're seen as enemies by the outside church. This really isn't the history of the church, rather it's the history of the actions of a handful of church members is all. We can say that about anything, but that's true here too. Lesson. Everything you do as a baptized member of the church reflects on you, but since you have taken the name of the Lord upon you, everything you do also reflects on Him, the rest of us, and the church. That's the lesson here. When we read that in 35:12, 13 to 16, it is a responsibility we all share, and that is to be a light to the world. I'm going to read those verses right now, please. 35:12. It says, Verily, verily, I say unto you, I give unto you to be the salt of the earth. But the salt is not to savor, wherewith shall the earth be salted. The salt therefore is good for nothing, but to be cast out and turned to the foot of man. Verily, verily, I say unto you, I give unto you to be the light of this people. A city that set on a hill cannot be hid. Behold, do men light a candle and put it under a bushel? Nay, but that on a candlestick, and giveth light to all that are in the house. Therefore let your light so shine that this purify this people, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. It's a responsibility we all share. This is the route that they took. They left Crooked Creek, Arkansas, went through Territory, Kansas Territory, Nebraska Territory, down into Utah. Down into Utah Territory, which is really big at the time. Area where Kenny and the Fancher parties went south of Mosaic on the California Trail. Multiple extreme interactions with Mormons all the way from Provo to Sioux City. The Arkansas Company, and period at the same time, willingness to send them much needed supplies, are reported to have repeatedly made the following statements. It's reported. I can't find any evidence that they actually made them. 1. They claim to be those who helped mob the Saints in Missouri and participated in the death of Joseph Smith, even claiming to own the pistol that shot him. This is all according to the Saints. They decided to kill Brigham Young because of the policy of not selling guns to travelers. Their intention is to raise an army of mob in California and return to kill every last Mormon. These outrageous threats seem to be out of character for the known members of the Fancher party. If they were made, it was supposed to have received the hospitality of the Saints who refused them supplies because of the Utah War. Things came to a head in Cedar City. When the same threats were made and a woman was abused violently in public, Mark Selby attempted to arrest the horseman but was able to. That appears to have been the last straw.
It remains the West's most tragic episode of the wrong people in the wrong place at the wrong time. Just days after the declaration of martial law, an immigrant company of 150 men, women, and children entered the Utah Territory. They were led by the Baker and Fancher families. They insisted on crossing the territory, north to south, to take the warm weather route to California.
They were a combination of Missourians and Arkansas people. And that was one more red flag for the Mormons, because the Missourians had driven the Mormons out of their state at a great loss of property and as well as life. Just before the Fancher train arrived in Salt Lake City, the Mormons in Salt Lake City received word that Mormon apostle Parley P. Pratt had been murdered by an Arkansas man in Arkansas. And so you have two states which in Mormon mind represented people who hated the Mormons and who had murdered the Mormons, now represented in this wagon train.
The Baker-Fancher party, footsore, hungry, was denied food and supplies under the martial law decrees of Brigham Young.
He then gives notice that no one is to trade with non-Mormons up and down the line. Save your harvest. Don't trade. We need it all. Tough times are ahead.
As the company moved through the territory towards the southern settlements, they lashed out at the Mormons.
And even boasted that once they got to California, they had been treated so poorly by the Mormons as they were coming through the Utah area. They said, when we get to California, we're going to urge that they attack you from the California side, too.
War councils were held in the Mormon settlements of Parowan and Cedar City. The Baker-Fancher party was viewed as a threat. A decision was made, and a writer was sent to inform Brigham Young. In the first week of September, the Baker-Fancher party had pulled into a high pasture along the old Spanish Trail. It was called simply the Mountain Meadows, and it had been a favorite resting spot of Parley Pratt when he traveled the area. On September 7th, the camp was fired on by Indians and militiamen disguised as Indians. The siege lasted for 4 days. Then, representatives of the Mormon communities came forward with a white flag of truce, saying the Indian attack could be called off if the company would surrender their weapons, leave their possessions, and simply walk away. 17 small children were placed in a wagon. The wounded immigrants were placed in another. Then walked the women, and then the men in single-file lines. Armed militiamen were on either side. A mile outside of the camp, a signal was given. Within minutes, the only survivors of the Baker-Fancher party were the children. More than 100 people, including the wounded laying in the wagons, were dead. The next day, a rider barreled into Cedar City with an urgent message from Brigham Young.
Go with all speed. Spare no horseflesh. The emigrants must not be meddled with if it takes all Iron County to prevent it. They must go free and unmolested. Brigham Young.
Isaac Haight, one of the leading figures of southern Utah, reportedly broke into tears.
Too late. Too late.
Years later, John D. Lee, facing trial for what became known as the Mountain Meadows Massacre, talked of the oath that bound those who had been on the killing field.
From that day, this has been the understanding with all concerned in that massacre, that the man who divulged the secret should die. He was to be killed wherever he was found, for treason to the men who killed the immigrants and for his treason to the church. The orders to lay it on the Indians were just as positive as they were to keep it all secret. John D. Lee.
The story of an Indian massacre never held. Within weeks, the California press was demanding vengeance.
What effect the news of the Mountain Meadows massacre will have at Washington, it is hard to foresee. But we much mistake the character of President Buchanan and his cabinet if it does not lead speedily to such action as will cause that arch-traitor, Brigham Young, to repent of his temerity. The blood of American citizens cries for vengeance from the barren sands of the Great Basin. The San Francisco Bulletin.
It was a time of war hysteria, when the wrong people came to the wrong place at the wrong time, and few would ever doubt that the wrong thing happened.
That's the sad story of the Mountain Meadows Massacre, my friends. Later in that day, Isaac Cade and other City leaders sent a message to William Dane, the commander of the district militia and the state president of nearby Parowan, seeing advice what to do about the immigrants. Though the vast majority of the company had caused no trouble, no one had physically harmed any of the residents. People in town were seething when the immigrants left. So they began plotting revenge. William shared Isaac's message with the council of church and town leaders. They determined that the Arkansas company was probably harmless. Do not notice the threats, William counsel. Isaac and Leonard, the words were wind. They injured no one. Dissatisfied, Isaac sent for Johnny Lee, a later estate in a neighboring town. John taught farming to local Paiutes and had a good relationship with them. He was a hard worker and was eager to prove himself to the settlements. State President, Mayor, and militia Captain Isaac Cade, going against the superior order of his military, William Dane put a planned action to annihilate the fascist party, preventing all their threats seriously and feeling an urgent need to protect his fellow saints as well as the church and the territory. This was his plan. Sending informers to assemble the Indians and incite them against the party, was making it an Indian crime exonerating the Mormons. They planned to entice the Indians with the promise of the Fancher Carl as a reward. Isaac Cade's appointment was John D. Lee. The Indians attacked the Fancher party 3 different times, beginning on Monday, September 7th, were forced to retreat each time, leaving many of their own and the Fancher party wounded or killed. When these attempts failed, and without disclosing them to the council, James Haswell sent Selection to seek the advice of Brigham regarding the Fancher party problem. He rode there in 3 days without rest, and Brigham ordered him to return immediately with orders to leave the Fancher party alone, and then settle their differences with the Indians. Meanwhile, as Lee and Haight attempted to cover up the Mormon involvement in the attacks and the deaths, members of the Fancher party were murdered. For more than a week, the lieutenant watched the men and their families grow more and more agitated over the Arkansas immigrants. In the evening, John Higby, John Lee, Philip Cleveland Smith, and other leaders reviewed the plan of attack with the militiamen. When the men agreed to the plan, convinced if they let the Arkansas company go free, the enemies of the church would learn the truth about the siege. The Indians, who had been promised that this would be an easy raid, were becoming frustrated with the lost braves as well as their failed attempt to get the cattle. But they were waiting restlessly, more Indians arrived at their camp. Council meetings were held in Cedar City, but Dame severely went against the council's decision, and prior to hearing from Brigham Young, moved ahead with their plan to avoid exposure and or disaster. A diabolical plan was concocted. The next day, the morning of the September 11th, that's the original September 11th, members of the Iron County militia promised the immigrants protection if they would give up their weapons. Under the guise of leading them to safety, the militiamen, acting under orders from the local commanders, killed the man while Indians slew the women and children, approximately 120 in all. Only 17 very young children were spared. They returned with government help to their relatives in the east. Commands were made to retain the blame to the massacre entirely upon the Indians. John D. Lee was asked to come to Salt Lake to report to Brigham Young. He placed the blame on the Indians as had been previously agreed. Later, when Brigham Young found out the men of Iron County had been fully involved, he encouraged the governor coming to investigate. Nothing ever occurred. In 1874, a territorial grand jury indicted 9 men for their role in the massacre. Most of them were eventually arrested, though only Lee was tried, convicted, and executed for the crime. Another indicted man turned state's evidence, involuntarily testifying and giving evidence against the other defendants, and others spent many years running from the law. Other militiamen who carried out the massacre labored the rest of their lives under a horrible sense of guilt and recurring nightmares what they had done and seen. Now, I've read the histories of a lot of these men, and it's sad that they spent the rest of their lives running from the law. They disguised themselves. They were in disguises. They appeared as men, women, everything that they could to get away from the law, but they never could get away from the bad dreams they had of what they'd seen and done. Although many legislators like London massacre soon after it happened, there is to understand the extent that sailors involved and the terrible details of the crime became incrementally over time. In 1859, they released from their calling state president Kate and other prominent citizens who had a role in the massacre. In 1870, they excommunicated Kate and Jenny Lee from the church. 2 decades later, Jenny Lee was tried twice and executed for his involvement. Although he was in no way the only officer involved, no one else was ever tried for this crime, although several were indicted, but their case was dismissed for lack of evidence. Haight, Dame, and Higbee, who all likely would have been convicted, spent the rest of their lives as fugitives from the law, running from the law and justice. This is where the crime occurred. This is what Mountain Meadows looks like. I took these pictures myself. I'm not a very good photographer, but I take them. This is the monument that's been raised by the descendants of the people who were killed. And at the 150th anniversary, President Irving conducted and said the following. Quote, the responsibility for the Mountain Meadows Massacre lies with the local leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In regions of Mountain Meadows, who also saw civic and military responsibilities with the members of the church acting in their direction. The gospel of Jesus Christ that we espouse abhors the cold-blooded killing of men, women, and children. Indeed, advocates for peace and forgiveness. What was done at the Mount Meadows long ago by members of the church represents a terrible and inexcusable departure from the Christian teaching and conduct. No doubt divine justice will impose appropriate punishment upon those responsible for this massacre. That's pretty serious coming from the first presidency. May the God of heaven, who sends the daughters we all are, bless us to honor those who died here, by extending to one another the pure love and spirit of forgiveness with his only begotten Son personified. Now let's keep it, and then you can read the whole article there. My friends, I want to bring my testimony to you that what happened at Mount Meadows was wrong. The whole Utah war was wrong. That was inflicted upon us by the government, but our reaction to it, the Mount Meadows massacre, was wrong. So I pray that we can act more faithfully, more prudently, more wisely in the future, and avoid these kind of outrageous events that cast a dark shadow on the church. I say in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.